Welcome to the biggest influences. This is the real Joe Rogan.
Up until podcasts and the internet, you had a limited sort of ability to fully express the pros and the cons and explain the nuance of what these experiences are about. And you're instead dealing with this sensationalist perspective where they're just trying to, just trying to highlight whatever the most the wildest aspects of the experience, pro or con, would be, so they can get a lot of people to pay attention to it. It's like it becomes prostituted.
Yeah. And I think the long form podcasts where you can have the whole story, you can get the whole story out unedited by people that are wanting to do it. But I will say, in terms of educating people about psychedelics, what we're doing is a lot of MAPS is about public education, and so we're hosting the world's largest conference on psychedelics ever, and it's going to take place June 19th to the 23rd.
How many DEA agents do you think will be in the audience?
Well, I think some. We also have some police officers who are. We have one. Sarko Gregarian is a full-time police officer in Winthrop near Boston, but he's also a psychotherapist, and he's been through our training program in order to give MDMA therapy to other police officers. We just had the first psychedelic conference in Iceland, and Sarko came, and also did his police chief came. And we met with the Minister of Justice in Iceland. The conference was phenomenal, the psychedelic conference in Iceland. And now the Minister of Justice is interested in having Iceland fund a study to give MDMA to prisoners, to work with them to see about dealing with their traumas, to reduce recidivism, also with victims of crime, to help them deal with their PTSD, and also with prison guards and police. So we have this opportunity in Iceland to potentially make it a example of a countrywide approach. Our new big vision, and I'll get back to the Psychedelic Science Conference in just a second, but our new big vision is a world of net trauma by 2070. So this idea of every year we're adding to the burden of trauma that people are experiencing, and then it lasts. There are some people that get better, but there's many people that get stuck in PTSD. And then there's multi-generational PTSD. There's what's called epigenetics, which is, biological evolution takes place over long periods of time. But what turns the genes on and off is epigenetics above the genes. That can change from your own experience. And there's a woman, Rachel Yehuda, at the Bronx VA that has done studies with Holocaust survivors and their children, and has identified an epigenetic mechanism by which this is passed on from parent to child. And it could be either from the father or the mother line. It's in either of our genetics. So this idea that we are increasing the burden of trauma by, there's some estimates that by 2050, that if climate change continues as it does, that there will be about 1 billion climate refugees from droughts and poor crops and lack of water and all of this, so that it feels like the humanity is going to be burdened more by trauma. We have incredible problems with mental health because of both the COVID and other things, so that what we want to do is reduce the burden of trauma every year and get to net zero trauma. And that's it will take multi-generations. And the end goal is mass mental health and a spiritualized humanity. And that's the hope for the future. And we will be talking about this at the Psychedelic Science Conference. So it's going to be at the Denver Convention Center. We have the entire Denver Convention Center. We already have, be part of the breakthrough.
19 to 23?
Yeah, and it's we got over 5,000 people coming. We hope there'll be about 10,000. And we'd also like to say that we have a special discount code for people who are listening. So it's psychedelicscience.org, and if you just put in Rogan20, it's a 20% discount.
All right.
And so we think if people really want to get involved in this field in any way, to be a therapist or to run clinics or to manufacture drugs or start new companies or just how do you blend this with meditation, anything, there's going to be over 300 speakers. We have incredible opportunities for people to learn and grow and get involved. We have this the Denver Convention Center. We have an enormous number of exhibits from probably 150, 175 different exhibits, and Deepak Chopra will be there. I mentioned Aubrey Marcus. He's coming with Aaron Rodgers, the football player who's used ayahuasca, which is DMT and T form. Michael Pollan is going to be there. Paul Stamets is going to be there. Pretty much the research community from around the world doing psychedelics research, and also drug policy reformers. And Denver was the first city that made mushrooms the lowest enforcement priority. So we're going to have experiential opportunities for people that will be federally legal.
I think Denver was also the first city that decriminalized marijuana.
They have done.
Because it was a long time ago when marijuana was not state legal.
Yeah, I think Ann Arbor might have been one of the.
Oh, really?
Very
Michigan?
First, yeah, well, just because of the college there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but Denver and Colorado is very progressive. The mayor's going to help us open the conference. We've got the support of the governor. We're actually doing a project with the Denver police because mushrooms are the lowest enforcement priority, and we want to educate police on what happens when you encounter somebody with a difficult trip. You could make it worse for them, or you could sort of treat them in a certain way so that you calm them down and, they don't need to be tased or, however.
Yeah.
So we're trying to educate police on how to de-escalate people with difficult psychedelic experiences. So the conference is going to be the theme. We've had. This is our fourth psychedelic science conference that we call that, where we bring everybody together. The first was 2010, and there we had about 400 people, something like that. But that was enormous for us, and that was in San Jose. The second one was in 2013, and we had at this point about 1,000 people, and that was in Oakland. And then in 2017, we had another one, and that was over 2,000 people, and that now is still the world's largest conference. We had like 2,500, and now this one we think is going to be way more. So, and the theme of it, why we've waited so many years between 2017 and now, is that we are now at the doorway to a new world. And what I mean by that is that we are at an incredible moment in time where there have been probably $2.5 or more billion have gone into for-profit psychedelic companies. They haven't done so great in the stock market. A bunch of them have gone broke.
What is the idea behind these companies? What are they trying to accomplish?
Well, some of them were trying to develop new drugs. A lot of them were trying to set up networks of clinics. We also have ketamine, which has now been S-ketamine. An isomer of ketamine has been approved for treatment of depression. We ended up in November 29th, 2016, we had what's called an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA about our research with MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. So it took us 30 years from the start of MAPS, 1986, to 2016, where we presented our data to the FDA, and they said, yes, you can go into phase 3. Phase 3 is the final stage of research where you need to do safety and efficacy. And if you prove that to the satisfaction of the FDA, you get permission to market. So some of the new for-profit companies, Compass Pathways is one, and Usona is a nonprofit, are trying to develop psilocybin into a method, a treatment with therapy. Compass for treatment-resistant depression, Usona for major depressive disorder. And so a bunch of these companies are trying to develop new drugs. And I think some of them are thinking, well, the classic psychedelics like LSD, MDMA, psilocybin, well, MDMA we wouldn't say classic, but the classic psychedelics like, ibogaine, mescaline, psilocybin, LSD, DMT, all these are in the public domain. And so there's no patents on them. So people have tried to say, well, we'll patent the manufacturing process or we'll do something. But there's also use patents. But the use of psychedelics for therapy in different conditions is also in the public domain. So a lot of these companies are going to try to develop new molecules that they can patent. So that's sort of a classic pharma strategy. But
sounds horrible.
Well, I think
the
that
good thing is that it'll be legal. The bad thing is it'll be owned by pharmaceutical companies.
Well, I think it's true. It will eventually, these new drugs, but
no
these,
one should own them. That doesn't make any sense. That anybody should get a patent on. I understand that we're trying to undo 53 years of criminalization, but I just think that that's a bad strategy, and you're getting in bed with some demons.
Well, there is that tendency, and then you see what pharma does to try to protect the patents.
Exactly.
It's
just not.
And on the other,
it deserves to be legal.
Well, the classic ones that are off patent do. I mean, I am supportive of people patenting original ideas.
Sure.
And so if somebody develops some new molecule,
sure.
And for us, it's going to cost us hundreds of millions of dollars to make MDMA into a medicine. And so we've done that. So we've done that in an incredible set of ways. And I think this is why what I explained to you just a couple of weeks ago and why you were so gracious to invite me back now is because I talked about this crossroads that we're at.
Yeah.
And so MAPS has raised about $145 million in grants and most of it donations in our history. And we have gotten enormous value in people's donated time, expertise of all sorts. And it's hard to even put a dollar number on that, but it's been tremendous. And so we have used that to do this MDMA research. A couple years ago, with the rise of all these for-profit psychedelic companies, it became more difficult for us to raise donations because people are like, why should I donate now? I can just invest over here, and you've got a story now. Your story is that it looks like you're moving into phase 3. Maybe you can get investors. And so we didn't want to sell equity at the time, and so we do have, as I said, about $145 million in grants and donations and a lot of free donated time. But we also have $43 million in what's called a royalty share. So it is money from investors. They're mission-aligned investors. Ryan Zur organized it as the lead one called Vine Ventures. And they have about 3.8% of North American revenues from MDMA once we make it into a medicine for about 8 to 10 years afterwards. And if we don't give them a certain amount of money back, then it continues. But they don't have ownership, and they don't control what we do, and we can end up, prioritizing public benefit over profits. So we also have around $20 million in a loan that's potentially convertible into equity if we don't repay the loan. And we've got a couple of years there. But we have reached this spot where we have the nonprofit MAPS, which has about 35 people, is the 100% owner of the MAPS Public Benefit Corp., which is about 135 people, something like that. And so we have this situation. We also tried to do something new with pharma and something new with capitalism. So that capitalism, when you have for-profit companies, you're supposed to maximize profits. And if minority shareholders don't like the fact that the management isn't maximizing profits, they can try to throw them out. And so that produces a prioritization of profits over people, profits over social benefit. And so capitalism has been modified in a way with the Public Benefit Corporation. So that's a new corporate structure, maybe 20 years old, but relatively new.
Subscribe to Biggest Influences today.